So I just beat Abiotic Factor's early access, clocking in around 20 hours worth of playtime. In a year full of survival games, this stands above the rest. I think this is probably one of the most unique games I've played in a very, very long time. And I know what you're thinking. This just looks like Half-Life. Yeah, it is Half-Life, but it's a survival game. Seriously, I don't know why nobody else thought this would be a good formula for a video game up until now, because man, it works. But a lot of that is also due to the creativity that just oozes out of this game. A lot of times survival games can get very stagnant as you slowly get near the end and are just fighting the same spongy enemies. Not to say that Abiotic Factor didn't have its fair share of copy-pasted enemies that just got tankier the further you got in the game, but at the very least, the gimmick of each of the different zones was completely different, usually introducing at least one or two new creatures and crafting materials. So before I get too ahead of myself, I do want to mention the parts that I didn't like. Combat was pretty sticky. I think that this was a design choice though. It felt to me like they didn't want to have one character be too overpowered. And so by having the combat kind of at a slower, more stiff pace, it would encourage you to attack a monster as a group. Because this game actually goes up to 6-player multiplayer. Not that I ended up having anybody to play it with, I played it entirely solo. I also wasn't the biggest fan of the crafting UI. It did get the job done and it wasn't as bad as some other survival games out there. But things started to get pretty convoluted later on, like certain items would require other crafted items for their recipe. Another minor complaint is the mission objectives not being too clear sometimes. I was still able to get through the game without looking anything up online, but there were definitely some frustrating moments where I just needed to open a switch that the game should have pointed to. Even so, the fact that I was able to completely customize the difficulty experience for me as an individual is single-handedly the reason why I played through this. Because the default world settings are brutal and designed around multiplayer. So one last thing before we wrap up is I just want to praise the world design. So many times I would end up unlocking a shortcut that would end up leading back to my base, and it was always exciting whenever I would come across an alien portal because you never knew where it would take you. So do I recommend this game? Yes, I do. This is a sleeper hit of the year for me. If you enjoy classic shooters, and I'm not talking boomer shooters as they've been aptly named, but more so games like, well, Half-Life, then you'll really enjoy this one. And don't worry too much about the survival aspect. You can just turn all of those settings completely off if you want.